powder in surgery. Everybody jokes that it was like fairy dust. We kind of sprinkle in there with that. So I think, just from me being on board with you guys, selling it to a surgeon to use that doesn't have an open wound, but somebody that's immunocompromised, diabetic, or rheumatoid, or something like that. So what are, if I go to a product company, so if I'm going to say, okay, well, I have a diabetic doing whatever, an amputation, and I don't want it to hit, so I'm going to kind of sprinkle this powder in, once I close the deep structures, I'm going to put this in. So how am I going to sort of, I can kind of sell the product?
Yes, surgical, it's a touchy subject. ACell got investigated by the Department of Justice for off-label promotion. So a surgeon can use it however they want, but we cannot promote it as, hey, sprinkle a little bit of this in, at all your fascial layers and muscle layers and, deep tissue when you close. We can't say that as a company. We'll have somebody knocking on our door, a little upset. We've got to push it, surgically we, look at it more as like, okay, you've got a trauma case where you're just flat out missing tissue. You've got to do a graft or a flap. Okay, why don't you put the powder on, see what type of granulation tissue you can develop, maybe even get some healing in from the margins and, improve your chance for your graft or flap to take, and maybe have a smaller donor site. Because, if it takes a week for you to, do some of your reconstruction and whatnot, maybe you can get some healing in that time, and then you can use the material at the donor site as well. But there are people, there's going to be people who use it surgically because of those very reasons, like you said. It's like, oh, hey, it can't hurt. Maybe it'll help, maybe it'll help, prevent dehiscence. Maybe it'll help to, them heal quick enough to fight off infection, so I'm going to go ahead and use it, but we just can't promote it that way.
So it's indicated for surgical wounds, so we could promote it to use upon closing of the last, the primary suture. And I do think that
you can or you can't.
We can. It is because we have the indication for surgical incision. We just can't say, here's a surgical opening and just dump powder into the whole cavity.
But
it's like a fine line.
At least in my experience, surgical incisions, you're talking about usually a small amount of powder, and you're talking about preventative measures, and a lot of people are like, well, I don't have problems,
Mm-hmm.
So
don't do surgery.
Yeah, I know, but you know what they say.
Yeah, I agree with you.
If, for instance, I'm looking at it from the other standpoint, not just for me to use it, but for you guys to sell it. You've got a cardiac surgeon who, is doing a 5-vessel cabbage on a diabetic patient, and they don't want the sternum to dehisce. Or you look at a lumbar surgeon,
right,
or back surgeon doing the same type of thing on a diabetic. That they don't want to have any problems with that. So you really can't promote that, correct?
Well, yeah, we can, but we have to be really careful with it, because when you start to say, oh, sprinkle it in as you close, it's like, okay, well, how deep is considered the surgical wound versus, entering into the body cavity and stuff like that. But one of the other concerns that I have is that, there's a lot of not smart surgeons out there and reps that maybe aren't comfortable with telling them, exactly how to use it properly. You start pushing something like putting this in incisions, they put too much in, and now you're actually it turns into almost like a fluidized bed that prevents the tissue from approximating, from coming in proper tissue contact. And now if you put too much powder in, you can actually almost induce a dehiscence.
I see.
It's just one of those things where I've always viewed it as it's a really, it's a difficult sell. And then when you combine the potential negative complications of somebody teaching it wrong or using it wrong, and, it could end up, you got people talking about, oh, I put it in here and it turned into a goopy mess that looked infected, and so we had to open them and clean it out and then reclose, and that's our fault, not the surgeon's fault.
Well, that's the Trey Raleigh sales method.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
I mean, I think from a sales perspective, getting it into the hospital, there's two ways. The easiest would obviously be if they're familiar or if they're already using or the SKU of ACell's powder is in the system, then it's an easy conversion because it's powder like for like. This is a newer generation, and we've done our market research, so we can save the hospital significant money per application, $100 to $200. So that to me, that's a no-brainer. And then once you get it in, then you can go to multiple specialties, what have you. If the hospital's not using ACell powder, every single hospital has a patient that's a major problem that they can't discharge because they're there with a huge open abdomen or a pressure ulcer or they have necrotizing fasciitis. There's a problem patient in every hospital that's causing a liability, and people are stressed about how we're going to heal and discharge this patient. So I don't have the exact answer as to how to find that patient, but if we can, and we can show them that we could help this patient, this is what we did at Jackson to get ACell in there, and discharge the patient and have good results, then the hospital's kind of like, wow, well, we need this because it was a hero. I mean, the patients, it costed the hospital $2,000 a day at minimum, and if we can get them out, it's a home run.
Right. Okay.
So I don't think
it makes sense.
I mean, I think the surgical, going the surgical route is awesome, but I would not try to get a product into the hospital from a preventative stance. It sucks that we even have to have this conversation because if it was me, I'd be begging, or if I knew someone at high risk, I'd be begging to use the powder. But you get infection controls involved. They want documentation on cost savings. But if you go in and say, I have a powder, this patient's been on the wound vac forever, and we could speed up the healing process, they know how much that patient's costing the hospital every day.
Right.
So it's an easier sell.
With that, I think I get that. So, I started a patient. I started a patient on it, so I could kind of follow up, with that guy. So, I mean, is the idea to put it on wounds per se? I mean, is that really what you're looking? It's like a fine line because you don't want to go down the wound care route.
No.
The cost and I'm sorry, the wound center route, but it's sort of like, are these the patients that you debride in the OR and then put the powder on? Is that more of what you're kind of looking to do?
Yeah, where we've used it is like a deep surgical wound, like you said, deep debridement in the OR, put the powder on, and then follow up in the practice. I mean, if you need, we can give samples of product in the office. Either. Oopsie.